Welcome to Breaking Down Bergman. I'm David Friend.
I'm Sonia Strimban.
Today we're looking at Smiles of a Summer Night.
Jag visste inte att gitarrspelning ingick i utbildningen för högkyrkans prästerskap. Ett utmärkt vin. Du har god smak. Det gläder mig att du trots allt firar din tentamen.
Jag är så fruktansvärt olycklig.
Ja, visst, naturligtvis.
Du är ironiskt.
Du säger att du är olycklig, jag förstår inte orsaken. Du är ung, det är vår, det är månsken, du har klarat en tentamen. Du har champagne, en flicka som verkligen är mycket tilldragande. Ändå så är jag olycklig. Ungdomen har fruktansvärda pretensioner.
Men jag älskar henne ju inte.
Ännu ett skäl att vara belåten.
Vi har syndat och det blev alldeles...
Blir du avkastad så ger du upp igen innan du blir rädd. Den regeln är gemensam för både kärlek och ridning. Fy så äcklig. Varför ska du röra ihop allsammans med gossen? Erotiken är ynglingarnas och gubbarnas leksak. Kärleken är...
Så en ung människa kan inte älska då?
Jo, visst. En ung människa älskar alltid sig själv. Sin kärlek till sig själv. Sin kärlek till själva kärleken.
Men vid din mogna ålder, då vet man naturligtvis vad det vill säga att älska.
Jag tror det.
Det måste ju vara underbart.
Det är fruktansvärt, min son. Man vet inte om man ska kunna stå ut med det.
So it's 1955, off the heels of Dreams, another box office failure for Bergman, but here is a surprise success he didn't see coming. Yeah, he was apparently sitting on the toilet reading the newspaper when he was shocked to discover that the film had played at Cannes without him knowing, and it was a huge hit.
Oh,
In
Bergman.
fact, it was an award winner.
Yeah, this is really where Bergman's career began to take off. He had some recognition, but not the good kind. And this is a film that was actually critically appraised and loved by audiences. I think what's unique about it, or one of the things that's unique about it, is the subject matter. It is on the surface, a romantic comedy.
Yes, and actually, it's usually referred to as Bergman's first comedy period. Now, we sort of agree, sort of disagree. There was It Rains on Our Love, his second directorial effort. There was a little bit of humor in that. It's interesting that this is considered a romantic comedy because, in fact, it comes at one of the darkest times in Bergman's life. He was feeling the last moments of his relationship with Harriet Anderson just crumble away. He was in a terrible financial situation. There was a lot of questions about his future as a filmmaker. Now that the studios were just counting up the losses with all of his films. And he was in such a mental state that he was actually making himself ill. He thought he had some form of illness that was going to kill him, but in fact, apparently it was his nerves.
If you really look beneath the surface of this film, I think a lot of that darkness and anxiety and neuroticism is reflected in the film. It's not just a simple wham bam thank you ma'am rom-com.
But the way it's packaged is very clever, and I think that's the first take on this. What it makes it different from a lot of other Bergman films. It's a period piece, the first that he did.
Yeah, I think the period piece actually gave him a lot of license to play with certain things in the film, more so than if he had set it in a contemporary day-to-day setting.
Right, I think it gives a bit of distance for the audience between the heavy topics that Bergman likes to tackle and, you know, the entertainment that a lot of them are going to the theaters for. Now, here's an example. Infidelity, adultery. It's really a strong topic that Bergman addresses here, but by placing it in that period piece, sort of Jane Austen-esque, you know, pretty frilly dresses and romantic adventures, it keeps it far enough away from the modern reality that people can sort of laugh at it and chuckle and not relate it too closely to their own experiences.
And then he gets to play with these things, like, for example, we have a Russian roulette duel in the middle of the movie between two of the male characters that are fighting over the women. And, you know, obviously you couldn't do something like that if you were to set it in 1955. People don't have duels. I mean, you could have a fist fight in a bar or something, but it's not the same. That kind of climactic and highly romantic element that you would see from a period piece is exactly what I think lends it power. But it also shows the madness of being in love, or the madness of desire, that you would go to the point of willing to blow your brains out with a gun to prove a point, that you are A, more of a man, and B, more deserving of whoever your love object is.
It also allows Bergman to really tighten the focus on the relationship aspect here, because there's not all those external factors like you might consider these days with, a job, family responsibilities. It really isolates these characters in their setting and allows him to toy around with the subject. And I think it works great.
I completely agree. I highly enjoyed it. I thought it was impactful and entertaining at the same time. And it's one of those techniques that you can watch it on a superficial level and simply enjoy the frivolity of the film, right? However, if you think about it more deeply, there are so many subtexts to the movie and so many deeper messages that it becomes really interesting the more and more you unpack it.
That's the real challenge, I think, of discussing this film, and I have a feeling it will be one of our challenges in the future, is we can't cover all of the depth, all of the details that Bergman addresses in these movies, because we just don't have the time, and two, we'd be making 7 or 8 videos for each film. So we have to pinpoint some ideas, and we have a few here. The theme of humiliation has turned up in Bergman films before. We've seen him address it in Sawdust and Tinsel in particular, but here he really expands on it. And it's very interesting what he says, because practically every character in this film is humiliated in some way.
I think because he's talking about relationships and the way that people expose themselves to one another in a relationship to either gain love or declare love or whatever the case might be, they're put in a position of vulnerability. And he really plays with that to show what happens when it doesn't work out.
Even Desiree, who is the mistress in this film, she almost seems to escape unscathed, but not really, because she's the one character that is always being left alone, especially by the men in her life. She's the second choice, and so she sort of exists in this world of humiliation. The men also are humiliated in their own ways.
Yeah, the main character, and particularly Frederick Egerman, he lost his first wife, and he remarried to a girl that is practically half his age. Like, she's 16 when he married her. And as the film goes by, we realize that they never even consummated their wedding.
And he's waiting.
For her to come to him rapturously. And
of course, she never does, which is, its own form of humiliation. But it worsens.
The worst part is that he is then cuckolded by his son right under his own nose. And then they elope together. And as they are driving off in the carriage, her white veil floats off her head, lands on the road, and he picks it up. Like, he picks up her virginity and holds it in his hand, and that's the last shred he has of her as she rides off.
Very heavy symbolism, and of course a little bit of humor from Bergman there. So of course all of this humiliation is sort of humorous to the audience, but there's also this layer of it being pathetic in some sense.
Yeah, pathetic and very hurtful to the people that are experiencing it in a way in which you don't really see them recover. And I think that's really what leads to this undercurrent in the film of a really dark topic that Bergman is really trying to unpack and maybe deal with in his own personal life, because I feel like since this theme has kind of resurrected itself in film after film after film, I think it's a personal anxiety that he's fighting with that's manifesting in the movies.
Even just looking at the fact that Harriet Anderson is in his film when their relationship has just crumbled and become a disaster, and there's something a little bit humiliating to be a director directing your failed relationship on the screen.
Yeah, especially in the types of roles that he keeps casting her in, which is highly desirable women, like sexually promiscuous and flirtatious. And in this film, Harriet plays the servant girl, and she's very loose and free with her sexuality, and she ends up picking up this little romance on the weekend. And I don't know, the characters of the servants in this period piece actually almost remind me of like a Greek play or like an Oscar Wilde drama, where they're really kind of nefarious and gregarious in the way that they carry on their relationship. So there's like a really slapsticky comedic element to them, but they're kind of like court gestures where through their comedy they're saying like really substantial truths about things, right? Yeah. And so there's this great dialogue after the first time that they've got it on, and her and the groom are sitting against a tree, and he says these really poetic lines about love, and they're really melancholic, and they ring true, I think, what this movie talks about.
Varför har jag aldrig varit en ung älskande? Kan man säga med det?
Ja, kära hon. Trösta sig. De unga älskande finns bara i ett fåtal på jord. Ja, man kan nästan räkna dem. Kärleken har drabbat dem som en gåva och ett straff.
Och vi andra?
Vi andra?
Ja, vad blir det med oss?
Vi åkallar kärleken, ropar på den, ber om den, skriker efter den, försöker att efterlikna den, tror att vi äger den, ljuger om den.
Men vi har den inte.
Nej, min sockerstrut. Älskandets kärlek är oss förmenad. Vi har inte gåvan.
Och inte straffet.
Och inte straffet.
We spend our lives trying to achieve this state of bliss with another individual that we may be entirely incompatible with. And that brings us to huge tragedy, like humiliation or loss or, the death of our dignity or our self-worth or death, period.
For example, the son who runs away with his father's wife, it's never touched on in the film, but you can assume that their relationship has just been destroyed and will never fully recover from that. I mean, who's going to, rekindle a friendship or some sort of relationship with their father after you've stolen his wife away and stolen her virginity?
Yeah, it's a very bizarre, and like even the son himself, he suffers so tragically in this hidden love that he nurses for his father's wife, and he tries for so long to abstain from making it known that he practically almost kills himself. It's very harsh.
And I think that's what's so ironic about this film is that on the surface it is a very happy, very accessible piece of cinema, but again, underneath, it is one of Bergman's darkest films that we've seen to date. Which brings us to the question of whether or not this is essential Bergman. Yes.
Yes, definitely essential. I think he's doing something new and noteworthy. And, I mean, it's a film that's award-winning. It has critical acclaim, audience acceptance.
Very complex.
Yeah, it's very complex. And to add to that, I don't feel that we could possibly do it justice in 10 to 12 minutes. So I would really invite you to take this opportunity to give us feedback and really give us your take on the movie and what you enjoyed about it.
Is this one of your favorite Bergman films? I think that's the question, and I think that's been a debate for a lot of people. This is definitely a turning point for Bergman, and we talk about this all the time, but really this is his push into the mainstream of art house cinema, if we want to call it that. From here, his next film is The Seventh Seal, which is possibly his most famous film, his most acclaimed film. And I think with Smiles of a Summer Night, you're starting to see the Bergman that we know
and
emerge.
Will love.
And will love. Well, that brings us to the end of Breaking Down Bergman this time around. Of course, subscribe to the channel.
And don't forget our Facebook page. We'd love to see you like us on Facebook and comment.
We'll see you next time on Breaking Down Bergman.